Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new self-titled album from Chrome Sparks. Chrome Sparks is the alias for Jeremy Malvin? Sort of a rising newcomer artist from New York. Well, he's had 3 EPs prior to this, called My Heart, Sparks, and Goddess. He's done a number of remixes for The Glitch Mob and Porter Robinson. Guy seems like a decently promising downtempo producer, sort of in the Jamie XX vein. Especially his biggest single, Marijuana, which uses the exact same voice sample that Jamie XX would later use on his track, Loud Places. But, you know, Chrome Sparks isn't exactly a straight rip-off. He's got more, you know, synth arpeggios and xylophone-y sounds that kind of give him more of his own identity, and quality-wise he ranges from genuinely engaging and atmospheric and textured to bland and meh. Yeah, I can't say I was super impressed by everything he's done. The Sparks EP was easily the most consistently good of the 3. I really liked all 6 tracks on that one. Definitely check that out at least. But the other 2 were a bit more spotty and had some pretty moments. I mean, My Heart never particularly rose above decent or drew me in that much. But, you know, at least there he has an excuse. It was his first release. He would go on to deliver better stuff. Going into this debut album of his, I didn't really know what to expect. I was maybe a little worried given how the last time an artist with this little establishment but out of nowhere success was Petite Biscuit. And I did not like Petite Biscuit. I mean, the good news is that Chrome Sparks definitely has more to his name than that guy, and I can see he has far more potential to deliver something good. But I wasn't precisely going out of my mind with anticipation for this, so what did we get with this self-titled debut? Well, it was better than Petite Biscuit for sure. Guy at least has his own recognizable style and sticks to it. I think he's still got some pretty good potential. But that potential I don't think was fully shown on this album. I didn't think this was anything special. The whole thing felt more watered down and commercial than his previous stuff, and I just didn't really find myself all that interested or engaged. Well, okay, there was one track on here which I thought was excellent, and that was the closer, To Eternity. That track was freaking amazing. It sounded like a tribute to Air. Like, everything from the vocoders to the bass lines to the other various synth textures seemed like it was trying to go for something that could have fit on 10,000 Hertz Legend, albeit slightly modernized. And given how we're not going to get anything new out of Air anytime soon, I was 100% on board for this. Also very Pink Floyd-esque as well, like Wish You Were Here period stuff, although Air have always had that kind of Pink Floyd sound to them as well. Given how this guy has always seemed inspired by French artists like Jean-Michel Jarre, Etienne de Crécy, all those others, I'd be more willing to believe this is an Air tribute. It does sound like something they would do. But whatever, great stuff for you regardless. The rest of this though, I mean, none of it was bad, but everything just kind of has the same, you know, synth, arpeggio, sequencing stuff, and it all just kind of runs together in a boring mush that often feels like it's trying to appeal to the Odessa crowd, trying to be big and inspirational, but just using a palette of synth tones I've heard from lots of artists before, be it Flylo, Flume, Bonobo, John Hopkins, or any number of more commercial downtempo artists from the past couple of years. Not to mention melodies which are really forgettable and chord progressions which just sound typical of this genre. I mean, it's above average. I've been convinced this guy has enough talent in him to deliver a full album that's of much better quality later down the line, but that's not really the case on this particular album. This debut was a dull, boring letdown. I'm definitely not going to listen to this again after the video goes up. So let's talk about individual tracks. Now, the vocal tracks on this album are pretty consistently the worst material on this album, the points at which this album dipped into the deepest mediocrity. The only one I could particularly get behind was All or Nothing. The synths were a bit punchier, the bass lines were nice, and it even brought in a horn section at one point, which was a nice touch. But the vocal presence of Angelica Bess left a lot to be desired. She just sounded like some generic female singer that came out of a Flume track. And the other track she was featured on, What's It Gonna Take, was even more generic and forgettable, just a boring pop track with nothing special to recommend it. I Just Wanna, with Klo, or however you say that, also did little to nothing for me for similar reasons. Not quite as generic pop, but yeah, still kind of generic by the standards of this genre. Attack Sustain Release wasn't that bad. It has the most distinctive singer on here. I'm not gonna try to pronounce that guy's name. But that one also kind of wore out with repeat listens. The instrumentals fared a bit better. I mean, I already mentioned To Eternity as by far the highlight from this album. But there were a couple of other decent ones here and there. Rocket was a nice intro to the album to hype you up and set the tone. That was a good one. Sugar, while it didn't start out that great, does eventually end up pretty nice, with some bubbly synth lines and nice little twinkly bell sounds in the background too. And I quite enjoyed Wings as well. Works well as this really light, fluffy, dreamy piece. Just the way all the synth progressions played off each other came off in a actually quite effective and beautiful way. But there was also tracks like Still Think, which I initially liked, but didn't really stand up well to repeat listens. I mean, I liked how there's kind of a part 1 and a part 2, but the part 2 is really flat and boring. And Oh My Perfection had a really good intro with those vibraphone sounds finally coming back from his EPs, but they're only in the intro, and the rest of the track just goes back into the generic sounds of the rest of the album. So yeah, that's basically it. I mean, this album, I want to make it clear, is not bad. I don't think Chrome Sparks is the kind of artist I feel like I can just immediately write off. Maybe if this was the only thing he's ever released, I don't know how excited I would be to hear anything new out of the dude. But I do think this guy may very well have a great album in him at some point. The dude has talent, he's had some creative ideas, and I do like the synth textures he uses, which call back to a number of artists I already enjoy, like Air and Jean-Michel Jarre and others, but I can't give this a pass either. There's nothing particularly interesting aside from the last track, and a couple of other decent tracks here and there, and more than anything, I just found the experience kinda boring. If you were previously a fan of this guy, I'd say approach with caution. Sure, it has the same style, but not quite as much substance as previous releases. And if you're new to the guy, just check out the Sparks EP first, much better stuff there. This album, it was okay, but I can't really sign off on this as anything special. I hope he can do better later. I'm overall feeling a 6.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. This was crazy, Friday the 13th, and like 3 other different albums that I want to cover dropped today, so you will be hearing about Microzik, Mr. Fingers, and Mouse on Mars pretty soon. I figured I can get this one out of the way first because I can just spend all day at work listening to this guy's stuff and digest it pretty quickly, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.